Are you bored yet? Have you watched everything there is to watch on Netflix? Was the highlight of your week Tuesday when Disney Plus came out, and now you've watched everything on there as well? You've only got the Herbie Goes Banana films left to watch. How are you getting on with this whole social distancing thing? Are you stuck inside? But because your family's there too, you've got no space. Everyone is on top of each other. You're just longing for a little bit of you time, a little bit of your own time, a little bit of free time, but you can't get any of it because everybody's there. Are you trying to juggle work? Are you trying to juggle school, homeschooling, teaching your kids, being their teacher as well as doing your job? Are you feeling guilty because you're not giving enough time to your job, but you're also not giving enough time to your family as well? Perhaps all you want is space, but you can't find it. All you want is space, but it's nowhere to be seen. But maybe for you it's the opposite. Maybe your kids are growing up, they've got families of their own to look after. Maybe it's just two of you at home and you're longing for company, you're longing for contact. All you've got is space and you're looking for something to fill it. You're longing for something to fill that void. You know, it's at times like these where well-meaning Christians say things like, just turn to the Bible for help. God knows what you're feeling. He understands what you're going through. God will watch over you. He will protect you. He will make sure no harm comes to you. And I understand why people can say things like that, but does God really understand what we're going through? Does Jesus really understand what it's like to experience what we're experiencing? I mean, when was he ever isolated? When did he ever feel alone? When did he ever feel separated from the people that he cared about, that he loved? Well, actually, there's two major examples that I just want to highlight to you in a few moments that we've got together this morning. The first one is recorded for us in Matthew, Mark and Luke's version of their Gospels. They write it down. And the context of what's happening is Jesus has just been baptised. He came to John the Baptist and it was the beginning of his ministry, and publicly in front of everybody, he declared who he was. This amazing sign, this amazing miracle that Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus is the Messiah that the Jewish nation had been longing for, been waiting for. And after that public declaration of faith, that public declaration of who Jesus is, Jesus begins his ministry. He's got 3 years in which he's going to change the world. So what does he do first? How does he begin? How does he kick-start all of that energy, all of that movement, all of that momentum? What's the first thing that he does? Well, let's have a look at what Matthew records for us. Matthew says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil." Now, that's an interesting way to start this new phase of life. When I was in Israel, did I tell you I've been to Israel? When I was in Israel, I went into the wilderness, and the wilderness is just this rocky wasteland. It's not these like rolling sand dunes that you might imagine the Sahara Desert to be. I've not been to the Sahara Desert, but I have been to Israel. And it's not a nice place to be, really. If you're going to spend any length of time, the wilderness is a rough, it's an arid, it's a rugged landscape. It's harsh, it's a difficult place to live. And Jesus goes off willingly into this wilderness to spend time on his own. And he was tempted by the devil when he's there. I know that's a bit strange, that sounds a little bit peculiar. Actually, that word tempted, the Greek word that's used there, could also be translated as tested. So Jesus, right at the beginning of his ministry, he willingly walks into the wilderness to be tempted, to be tested by the devil. And let's just take a look at, what happened. What were those things that took place? Well, it says in the next verse, Matthew 4 verse 2, after 40 days of Jesus being in the wilderness, he was hungry. I think that's often one of the most understated verses in the Bible. He's been in the wilderness for 40 days. Of course he was hungry. He was starving. He's had nothing to eat. And right at the end of that period of time, right at the end of those 40 days, the devil comes along to him to tempt him. And test him. Matthew continues, he says, the tempter came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. Hasn't Jesus got enough to deal with? Hasn't he got enough on his plate? He's been in the wilderness for 40 days. He's hungry. And now the devil's popped up just to tempt him and test him. And notice that question that the devil asked. If you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. And they will. you know, what the devil's doing here is tempting Jesus. He's testing Jesus. Does Jesus really know who he is? You know, one way to find out is to turn these stones into bread. And, you know, that will be a sign, yeah, that I am more than just a human being. Now, you might struggle with that concept because, you know, depending on your faith, depending on what you believe, you know, for me as a Christian, I believe that Jesus is divine, that he is completely God. But also, Jesus is completely man. See, what we believe about Jesus is that he is 100% God, but he's also 100% man. I know that's confusing and I can't quite get my head around that. But often we look to the divine nature of Jesus, and in doing so, we can miss the human nature of Jesus. And I wonder if there was ever a time in Jesus' life when, you know, that human side of him kicked in and he wondered, am I really who I think I am? Am I really who they say I am? Am I really who my Father says I am? He's at a low point. He's been in the wilderness for 40 days. You know, he's hungry. And the devil comes to him and says, if you are the Son of God, if you really are who you think you are you? Here's a sign, you could do this. You know, just turn those stones, meet your need, and provide yourself with some bread. And I'm sure that was a massive temptation for Jesus. And if it was me, if I was in that situation, well, I'd have done that in day 2, and it probably wouldn't have been bread, I'd probably turn the stones into cheeseburgers. So how does Jesus respond to that? Well, Matthew continues in verse 4, he says, Jesus answered, it is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. See, Jesus is quoting a verse, a passage in Deuteronomy. And the temptation here is for Jesus to give in to what he wants. And nobody would blame him. Of course, we all would have done that. We all would have given up long ago. But Jesus isn't focused on what he wants. Jesus isn't focused on what he needs. He's living for more than himself. So that first test didn't work, so the devil tries a different tactic. The devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. It's that same question again. If you are the Son of God. And the devil does something different. He quotes the Bible at Jesus. The devil's quoting from Psalm 91. He will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You know, does Jesus really know who he is at this point? You know, this would be a great sign. He could take him, he could jump off the top of that temple, and what would happen? You know, would God look after him? Surely God wouldn't allow Jesus to die at this point. That would confirm to Jesus that he is who he thinks he is, that he is who people say he is, that he is who his Father says he is. He could be sure. You know, the temptation here is for Jesus to not trust his faith, to only believe what he can see and what he can feel. And I'm sure that's the same temptation that many of us face. You know, often we can struggle to believe in God because we can't physically see him. You can't go up to God and pinch him and poke him. We say we can feel God, but we feel him in different ways. I can't feel God like I can feel this table. Is my faith only dependent on those things that I can touch? Is my faith only dependent on those things that I can see? Faith is far more than that. And that was the temptation for Jesus. Will he trust his faith, or will he trust his senses? Will he just believe in those things that he knows to be true by what he sees and what he can feel? Or will he allow himself to believe in his faith, in all the other evidence that is there around him? Jesus responded to the devil. He says, it's also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendour. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. See, the devil's changed tact here. He realises that his tactics are not working, so he does something else. And he offers Jesus something that isn't his to offer him. He offers him all the kingdoms of the world. And something that's interesting about this is actually this is what's coming to Jesus. You know, Jesus now is the King of Kings. He is the King of God's kingdom. All the kingdoms of the world and the splendour belong to Jesus. He is the King of it all. All this has been given to Jesus, but not at this point. At this point, Jesus is right at the beginning of his ministry. He's hungry and he's in the wilderness. And he's got a long road ahead of him. And Jesus knows what that road is like. Jesus knows the suffering that is waiting for him at the end of this journey. You see, there's a plan laid out for him. There's a road, a path laid out for Jesus. And the end of that plan, the end of that road, the end of that path is a cross. And it will see Jesus nailed to that cross. It will see Jesus taking the weight of the sin of the world onto himself. Sin, self-centeredness, self-reliance, choosing to not trust God, choosing to not look to God, choosing to ignore God in his own creation. The consequence of sin is separation from God. It's separation from the hope, from the joy, from the peace that God brings, from the life, from the fullness of life, the overflowing, the abundance of life, the everlasting of life that God offers us. To be separated from God is to lose that light, is to lose that life, is to lose that love that God offers us. This is exactly what Jesus experienced as he hung on the cross. He cried out to God, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? Why have you left me alone? You see, as Jesus bore the weight of the whole of the sin of the whole of the world onto himself as he hung on the cross, he was separated from his Father. That relationship, that closeness that he had with his heavenly Father had been separated. And he wasn't united with him as he had been before. Jesus and his Father were separated, and he cries out, my God, why have you abandoned me? And then Jesus died. In darkness, in isolation, alone, completely separated from his Father. But that's not the end, because a few days later, Jesus comes back to life. He was resurrected. He'd conquered the power of death. He'd conquered the power of sin. He was united with his Father again. And so can we. If we choose to put our hope, if we choose to put our trust, if we choose to put our faith in him, we can be united with our Heavenly Father, just as Jesus was. What the devil is trying to do is to get Jesus to skip this pain and get to the end. He's trying to get Jesus to take a shortcut. But Jesus knows there is no shortcut to where he's going. Jesus knows there is no shortcut for him doing what he has come to do. He can't cut corners. He can't skip to the end. If he did, he wouldn't achieve what he came for. Jesus said to him, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. See, Jesus had enough. He tells the devil to go away. He shifts his focus back onto who he is and why he's here, on what is in front of him, on his Heavenly Father. You see, everything Jesus did, he did willingly. He came from heaven to earth. He left the glory and the splendour of heaven and came to earth willingly. He walked into the wilderness for 40 days to fast, to go without food, to be tempted, to be tested by the devil willingly. He walked to the cross to endure the pain that he endured, to endure the weight of the sin of the world willingly. But why did he do it? Why did Jesus choose to self-isolate in the wilderness? I don't know. But I think he was different as a result of it. I think Jesus came out of the other side changed slightly. I think this experience in the wilderness was formative for him. It shaped him in some way. And I know that can be difficult to understand, and perhaps you don't like thinking like that. How can Jesus, who's fully God, be shaped? How can he be formed? Surely he's complete in who he is, and I believe that totally. But he's also human. Don't allow the divine nature of Jesus to allow you to miss the human nature of Jesus. Jesus struggled like we struggled. He experienced lots of the things that we experience. He knows what it is like to go through pain, to feel suffering, to feel alone. See, Jesus went into the wilderness and he came out changed. So what's that got to do with us? Well, we're in the wilderness. We just didn't choose to go there. And I'm not saying we're here because of God or because of the devil is testing us. But I do think there is an opportunity in front of us. I do think there's an opportunity for us in these testing times. You see, the world will be a different place when we emerge at the end of this. Whatever happens, we will be changed by this. The world will be changed by this. Our church will be different, and you will be different. The question you need to ask yourself, is it going to be a good different? Is this opportunity that's before you, is this experience that's before you, something that none of us would choose to go through? Will we be different? Will we be better when we come out the other side? And not just because we've got really long hair, I'm looking forward to that. See, the temptation for us is to want to rush through this period of isolation and distancing and get to the end. And don't get me wrong, I can't wait for this to be over. I can't wait for the suffering that this experience is causing, that this virus is causing, and the isolation is causing. I can't wait for this to be over and for life to get back to normal. But what I realise is that normal that we get back to will be different than the normal we experienced when we went into this phase of life. I don't want to miss the opportunity that this period of life brings. I don't want to miss the opportunity that it brings to change me and to change my family for the better. You see, we're establishing new rhythms of life, and actually some of those rhythms are really good, they're really healthy. I'm doing more exercise than I've ever done before. I'm spending more time with my kids than I did before. I'm actually spending more time outside, spending more time in the garden than I did before. You will be different when I see you physically again, but will you be better? See, as a family, we've talked about this, that in the future, people will remember the events that happened here. This will go down in history. People will tell stories about this. We've talked about our kids when they've grown up and they've got kids of their own, that they will tell them about this period of life. You see, when this is just a story we tell, let's make sure our stories are worth telling. When this is just a story we tell, let's make sure our stories are worth telling. Let me give you one last question to ponder. And I'm going to give you a little bit of space, a little bit of time to think about this. We're just going to play some music for the next few moments and give you the opportunity to talk about this with your family. And maybe you want to chat about this in the chat function that's going along with this, post some of those responses to that. Here's the question that I want you to think about. What can you do to embrace this new way of life for your good?
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. And through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart can fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah. me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. And came the morning that sealed the promise. Your very body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declares the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your very body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declares the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory. Yeah, hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living